The release of Cyberstorm Access has shaken up the meta quite a bit. Super Heavy Samurai and Pearly are quite formidable decks, so much so that I think it warrants an update to the deck profile. But before we have a look at that, we should look at some statistics. Kashtira is still the best deck in this format, but it doesn't mean we can ignore everything else, especially due to the fact that these combination of decks force people to side or main deck pretty nasty cards, which are fairly detrimental to Galaxy Eyes. But regardless, let's get into the deck profile. The core cards of the deck profile haven't changed that much. The main changes come from your side deck and your staple cards. But don't follow this deck list blindly. I do want to recommend some ratios that you personally may like, so it's up to you how you want to build your deck. But before we get into those types of cards, let's go through our core cards first. Firstly, we have 3 copies of Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. This is pretty obvious why we run 3 copies. So many cards rely on it. We then have 1 copy of Afterglow. Going first, you're probably going to use this on Cypher X, and it's easily recyclable via Soul Flare. We also run 1 copy of Emperor and Brave. This tallies up to 6 level 8s in the deck. It's the perfect amount of cards to draw exactly 1 copy of. It's really frustrating when you see Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon and Afterglow in your starting hand, or Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon and Emperor in your starting hand. We then run 12, technically 13 searches. This is 3 copies of Soldier, 3 copies of Wizard, 3 copies of Vanisher, and 3 copies of Orbital, with the extra searcher being reinforcement of the army. Cards like Vanisher and Orbital rely on another card being on the field to be useful. This is why we run 2 copies of Thrasher. We also run 1 copy of Summoner, which is usually going to be searched via Soldier, and is our main target for our second normal summon that Emperor provides. Those are the monster cards, and I want you to keep them like that. I don't think there's any alternative way you can run Galaxy Eyes without this specific setup. The only card I can see you changing is the amount of copies of Thrasher, increasing it from 2 to 3. You can also technically replace Thrasher with Photon Sanctuary, but I wouldn't recommend it because Thrasher could be used to go into your Xyz monsters, and Photon Sanctuary summons tokens which can't be used as Xyz material. The spell cards are a lot more flexible in the sense that you can change the amount of cards that you're running. The first spell card I want to talk about is Galaxy 100. I'm going to recommend running 2 to 3 copies of this, as its sole purpose is to dump Emperor to the graveyard. It does have another useful effect, which banishes 1 card from your opponent's extra deck. If you don't necessarily care about that effect, then I'm going to recommend running 2 copies. But if you really want to fully utilize Galaxy 100, then I'm going to recommend 3 copies. Being able to look at your opponent's extra deck is super powerful. Next, we have Trance. I suggest running 1 to 2 copies of this. The second copy is usually for follow-up. If you're going first and you make a board consisting of number 90, then you're going to use number 90's effect during your opponent's draw phase to search Trance for follow-up. Trance is also a card that you may even swap when you're side decking. This is because if you know you're going second, then there's no need for follow-up, meaning you only need to run 1 copy. We then run 1 copy of Expedition and Hyper Galaxy. The reason why we run 1 copy of these is because most of the time we're going to be searching these cards, and unlike Trance, they don't really provide much follow-up. Expedition is going to be what you use to get out Afterglow when you don't have a Galaxy Eyes on the field, and Hyper Galaxy is going to tribute one of your opponent's card and also trigger Galaxy 100's effect. Hyper Galaxy is also pretty good going second, as you can special summon Thrasher and proceed to tribute one of your opponent's card, giving you a free Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon on the field. Bear in mind that you would have to hard draw this in order to execute that, so if you are going second, you can remove Hyper Galaxy and put it into the side deck. If you don't even want to main deck Hyper Galaxy at all, then I'm going to recommend you swap it for a consistency card. Speaking of consistency cards, I'm going to recommend Bottle of Prosperity. 2 to 3 copies of this provides immense draw power, and what I mean by that is that you get to choose what card that you add to your hand. Though most of the time you're probably only going to be banishing 3 cards from your extra deck. I'll get onto the extra deck targets when we're talking about the extra deck. Onto our remaining 9 cards, Galaxy Eyes is extremely crippled against floodgate cards like Skill Drain, so it's really important that you main deck Cosmic Cyclone. I'd also suggest running Evenly Matched, but due to Super Heavy Samurai, you may want to change this to Cross Out. This is because everyone's running Draw and Lockbird. Draw and Lockbird is really good in this format, and it stops most decks, but that's the problem. It stops most decks, and that includes us. Because a lot of people are running Draw and Lockbird, including us, you can prevent your opponent from using it against you using Cross Out. Now onto the extra deck. I know the extra deck looks the same, but I do want to introduce some spicy tech. First, let's go over what we already know. An obvious card you should be running is Zeus. It's an Xyz based deck, so Zeus is always going to be powerful. Cypher X is going to be the one that allows you to trigger Afterglow's effect on turn 1, and is going to provide you with that protection effect. Cypher Blade and Full Armor are going to be your removal cards. Either one of these cards, but not both, are going to be Pot of Prosperity targets. Think of it this way: Full Armor is going to allow you to go into a full material Zeus, whereas Cypher Blade can allow you to remove any card on the field. Whichever one you value more, you're not going to banish. Number 62 and C62 are also Pot of Prosperity targets. Remember, once again, only choose one of them. 62 can be for the easy OTK if your opponent has no response, but if you fear your opponent has a response, then you can go into C62 instead, whichever one you value most at the time, or you think you're going to go into, use the other as banish material for Pot of Prosperity. Cypher Dragon is just to go into your other monsters, and number 38 is your typical spell negate. Tachyon Dragon can be swapped with Felgran, and both of them are going to be rarely used, so this is another Pot of Prosperity target. You then have number 90, which is your negate, and allows you to get Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon to your hand if you have Soul Flare. It can also grab you that extra copy of Trance if you need follow-up. You then have Galaxy Photon Dragon, which is an extender. You then have Starliege Photon Blast Dragon, which can special summon Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon from your hand, as well as provide that protection. Although Cypher X and Starliege kind of do the same thing, I would not recommend using any of these as banish material for your pot. We then run 2 copies of Soul Flare for consistency, interruption, and follow-up. But the last card might be a bit confusing. This is Wind Pegasus, and Wind Pegasus is actually supposed to represent multiple cards. To understand this, we need to go into the side deck. As I said before, I recommend running Crossout. You can even main deck this by swapping Evenly Matched. You can also run 1 copy of Call by the Grave, which acts as your 4th copy of Crossout. We then have 5 back row removal cards, but this can change into Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse cards. This is because Cosmic Cyclone and Evenly Matched are good enough to wipe balls against spell/trap card decks. We then run 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More, as well as Forbidden Droplet. Forbidden Droplet has too much of a cost for it to be effective in Galaxy Eyes. Galaxy Eyes needs its resources, so Forbidden Droplet is not the best card to use. Instead of Forbidden Droplet, I'm going to recommend Ultimate Slayer. If you don't know what Ultimate Slayer does, you're able to send 1 monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, target 1 monster your opponent controls with the same card type, whether that be Fusion, Synchro, Exceeds, Pendulum, or Link, and shuffle it into the deck. Bear in mind your opponent cannot respond with monster effects. This is much better than Forbidden Droplet as it doesn't take away resources from our hand, but instead from our extra deck. If our opponent is bringing out a lot of Fusion cards, then we can use Entis instead. It has a graveyard effects which allows you to target 1 card on the field and destroy it. If you don't want to run Entis, you can run Gurura instead, which will allow you to draw 1 card, effectively making you go neutral in card advantage. I definitely prefer this over Forbidden Droplet, and I will personally be running this. The only reason why I wouldn't suggest you main decking this is because of Kashtira. They basically have a walk-in dimension fissure which won't allow you to activate Ultimate Slayer, but then again Forbidden Droplet also has this problem. I'll show you some example deck profiles right now. This current meta for Galaxy Eyes is extremely difficult, so I'm trying to accommodate for that. Tell me what you think. What cards would you add? What cards would you remove? And once again, thanks for watching.